Morning, guys. How are we doing? It's the 28th of February 2021, and this morning I wanted to talk about a video that I saw this morning that really upset me. Actually, it's really upset me. And it was done by Buzzfeed Australia, and it was rating people's school lunches. Now, I live in the UK now. I grew up in the UK, and most of my life I had school lunches that were prepared for me by the school. They were sit-down dinners. Everyone had a proper dinner. There was none of this pizzas and hot dogs and bollocks. There was actually dinner, right? So meat, veg, all of that was there for our lunches, and our lunchtime was 2 hours long because some kids actually still went home for school lunch, and it allowed them that time to do that. Okay, in Australia they don't have that unless you're at private school. Okay, so if normal state schools, you take your own lunch, or there is a tuck shop which supplies things like sandwiches and pies for extortionate amounts of money. Not gonna lie, it's extortionate. And it was the kind of thing that my kids got maybe if it was their birthday, or the closest day to their birthday if it fell on holidays, which it always did for my eldest, and he was very put out by this, which he shouldn't have been, you know, because he's still got a lot of stuff in his birthday. So the day before the school holidays or the first day back, that's when he got his school lunch. But, you know, who's got $15 to spend on school lunches? You know, there's not many people have got that. And at the end of the day, anywhere between $5 and $15, that's what you were looking at paying per day, per child. Certainly didn't have that at the time. I was working all the hours God gave. I was a chef, I was a receptionist, I was doing all sorts of different things on the side just to make sure that my kids were fed with the basics and had clothes on their back and a roof over their head. You know, no one gave us any help. We didn't have any help. I raised those boys on my own. I was married at one point, but it was just like having an extra kid. So, you know, when, you know, you meet other parents and you get friends with them and stuff when your kids start school. And when my eldest started school, I met a lady who has become a lifelong friend. And she and I used to go to Woolies, because the other thing you have to understand as well is, although public or government schools are free in Australia, free education in Australia, it really isn't. Parents in Australia are expected to pay a voluntary contribution, which some schools have been known to send bailiffs after parents if they haven't paid. Now, this voluntary contribution is around $220 a year, or it was when my kids went to school. And my eldest now being 30, I can't even imagine what the inflation is. And at the beginning of the school year, not only did you have to get uniforms, buy all the kids' stationery for the year, and I mean all of it. We're talking exercise books, we're talking textbooks, we're talking any sort of stationery supplies of any description, any of that sort of stuff. Plus you had photos in the first week, plus the kids were, you know, all the school wanted to send all the kids to camp for the first week. You know, you were looking at, when your kids first started school, at the beginning of year, and in Australia the beginning of year is the first week of February. You were looking at spending, if you had just one kid, around about $1,200 just to send your kid to school for the first week. It was horrific, and it was scary, and it was hard. So, you know, parents, If you had that money, yahoo. But you're just coming off Christmas. You've just had all your quarterly bills come through, because there's none of this prepayment stuff that they have over here with the utilities. It all got paid every quarter, and that quarter always came up in January. So, you know, it was hard, and schools expected too much, and they still expect too much, from what I've heard from friends of mine who've still got kids in school. So, what I'm trying to say is this, right? My friend and I, we used to hit the sales as often as possible to get the stuff that we needed to get for the kids. It's the only way we could afford it. The other thing was that she and I discovered that the local supermarket Woolies used to mark their bread down at about 9 o'clock at night. Or about 8, 9 o'clock at night, they'd mark down all the bread. So we'd go in the first week of term, and we would buy up all the leftover bread and rolls and buns and all of that kind of stuff and bring it home. Then we would also purchase something like 3 kilos of Devon meat. Now, Devon is like the Aussie version of bologna or pork luncheon meat, you know. And we'd have a giant bottle of ketchup, and we'd also have a jar of peanut butter, a couple of jars of peanut butter, and a couple of jars of jam, really cheap jam, and it was 13 cents a jar. It was that cheap. Okay, this stuff it probably had the fruit had been waved over the top of it. Okay, so we used to get together, and we would spend one evening just absolutely, because we only lived down the road from each other, just hammering out enough lunches for her 4 kids and my son. My youngest wasn't at school at this point, and there was about 5-6 years between them, so you know it was a little bit of difference to have enough lunches for the entire term. And we'd wrap them, stick them in the freezer. So all the kids had to do was grab one. They'd get a savoury roll and a sweet roll, and then they could we'd make slab cakes, and we would cut them up, and the kids would get a piece of cake, and they would have a piece of fruit, and that would be it. That would be it. That would be their lunch, right? Being in Oz and having a lunch that's going to slowly defrost over the morning is a really, really good idea, because it keeps the rest of everything in your lunchbox nice and cool, and it doesn't go off, which is also important. But we had to do that, and the term lunches probably cost us, for all 5 kids, somewhere in the region of $20. $20. Yeah. At the time, which again was about 30 years ago. So, you know, 25 years ago. But we had to do it. We had to find a way to be able to do it. And as much as we were both working, she was working as a cleaner, I was still working as a chef, we were still doing all sorts of stuff. You know, her husband was working, he was in the army. You know, I was on my own, but I had hustles on the side, and I was working 2 jobs, plus selling my artwork, plus doing a whole heap of other stuff just to bring in money. And, you know, we were struggling, both of us, absolutely. And we didn't have the money to throw around on, you know, fancy brand name things and that kind of stuff. And what this video did was slapped every parent in the face who has working their ass off to make sure that their kid has something to eat to go to school with. It not only did that, but it slapped the face of the kids and made them feel worse about the fact that their parents couldn't afford to get them more than like a ham and cheese sandwich and an apple. And frankly, I don't think that that's acceptable. I think it's buying into this whole, if you don't have money and you don't have the things, then that's not okay, you know, and it's an us versus them thing again. And it's not bringing people into a realm of acceptance and, you know, tolerance, and, you know, it's again bringing back the whole judgy bullying that used to happen at school because the kids had the same lunch every day, that they didn't get tuck shop every day, you know, that they didn't have tiny teddies or whatever in their box for lunch. You know, they had handmade piece of cake that they loved even more than they would have tiny teddies. Tiny teddies they got on their birthdays if they were lucky, as part of their party. That wasn't something that was an everyday thing. They certainly didn't have shitty fruit roll-ups that were all sugar and no substance, you know. And it wasn't until much later, when I could afford my own dehydrator, that I used to make my own fruit leathers for the kids, and the kids used to love them. They loved them even more than roll-ups, you know, because they'd helped make them, and they'd made them from the fruit that we had grown in the garden ourselves, you know. So that had meant more to them than buying some brand named crap off the shelf that pretended to be healthy when it really, really wasn't. All I'm saying is this: the more we buy into and the more we create content that is non-inclusive, that encourages judging people by what they eat or what they wear or how they do things that may or may not be part of what they can control in their lives, is going to be just making things worse. It's a form of bullying, and it really needs to stop. And it's actually encouraging bullying, because they were marking themselves between A, B, C, D, and F like you would at school. And frankly, it's not acceptable, and it's not okay. You know, everyone deserves to eat. And if all a parent can afford is some, you know, markdown rolls with some Devon on it, with some ketchup for the kids, at least they're bothering to try, you know. There's a lot of kids out there, their parents don't even bother. So I think people need to check their privilege, because they're overprivileged and they expect everybody else to be too. Anyway, that's my rant for this morning. I'm going to go now. I have things to do. I do. I need to get dressed for a start. I'm not dressed. Anyway, enjoy your Sunday. I will see you guys later. Love you heaps. Mwah. Bye-bye.